Hi. Hi, I am Dan Carter, also known as Maybe Later Games, which is my indie company. I wanted to look at replayability in time loop games today. There's been a couple of time loop games that have come out recently, and I actually worked on one myself, so I feel like I'm in a bit of a position to know what's good about them and also where you struggle with making them. So I shall just jump in. So the games I'm going to be looking at today, I'm going to try and not do any spoilers. There might be some small notes about the game, but nothing that will ruin them for you. So these are the sort of examples that I'm going to be using today. We have Outer Wilds, which came out in 2019. In that game, we have a 22-minute cycle. When I say cycle, what I mean is you have 22 minutes to do what you need to do, and then we go back to the point in time that the game started at again and again and again, time loop. And this is the theme for all of these. So we have the 22-minute cycle. The idea of the Outer Wilds is you're roaming the planet and you have to explore the death of the universe. And the death of the universe happens after 22 minutes, so your job to stop it. Ann Achronist, Many Happy Returns. This is the game that I worked on and released last September. In this one, you have to go back in time to the same day over and over, change your ancestor's life, and by changing your ancestor's life, it changes your life in the future. And you keep doing that to get better and better futures. We also have Minute, which was a game released in 2018. Vlambeer's Jan worked on Minute. In this game you have 1 minute, would you believe, and you die after 1 minute and you respawn back at your spawn point. In this game you're supposed to shut down the factories that produce swords on the island. And finally we have Majora's Mask, which a lot of you might be familiar with. This was released in 2000 originally, and in this one, the moon will crash into the village of Termina in 3 days, and it's your job, again, to stop that from happening. And the 3 days is the cycle in this case. So, I wanted to just sort of have a look at how these games work. So first of all, we've got to think about how we're going to measure progress. If everything is set back to the beginning of the cycle, how are we going to make any progress? How do we keep it interesting? These games replay and repeat over and over again. Normally we think that's going to get quite dull, so how do we prevent that? What other issues might be faced, so other things that don't come up there, and also what are the benefits? What's the point in making one of these? Okay, so I've tried to look at measuring progress and see how we can break that up into separate sections. So the first part we have here is temporary progress. So this will be progress that you make in one loop, but this will be undone when the loop resets. So say, for example, if you unlock a door, when the cycle resets, you can bet that door is going to be locked again. So some of the progress that you make is going to be reset. This can be good because, for example, if you kill somebody, that's very important, well, you can undo that. So we have temporary actions. On top of that, we've also got permanent actions. So in Ann Achronist, when you complete a timeline, you get access to a new ending, and each new ending gives you a new ability. For example, if you befriend the witch, then you end up on a witch timeline, which gives you the ability to read minds in the future. So that is the way of progressing in Ann Achronist based on which future you get. Similarly, Majora's Mask and Minute have some form of permanent progress as well. In those games, you unlock items, and those items they stay with you through multiple repeats. So in Majora's Mask, the idea is that you transform using masks, and each of those masks have a different ability. Same for Minute, we have a sword, for example, which can cut through grass. You don't start with the sword, but you pick it up very quickly. So these are pieces of permanent progress that stick with you. Not only is there progress within the game, but also the game knowledge itself can sometimes be important. So in the Outer Wilds, I won't spoil what happens, but in one of the later pieces of the game, there are some anglerfish that you need to get past, and they're very good at eating you up. So rather than this being something that is actual progress by unlocking through an item, you're actually figuring out how to get past this section of the game, and that's just a part of game knowledge. Same for Ann Achronist. For one of those ones, you need to figure out what the Duchess's daughter wants as a present. When you figure that out, well, that knowledge stays with you, the player, so in a sense it's not necessarily permanent progress, but again, it's game knowledge. Here we have Majora's Mask. So this relates to all of them really, but we need to know the routines of the villagers. So with these cycles, the same events are going to happen over and over and over again. But if we know that this person is going to get to this point at this time, if we find a way of intercepting that, then we might be able to change the way the loop ends, if that makes sense. And this, again, is common for a lot of the cycle games. Finally, we have passwords, and these are, they kind of fit in with game knowledge again, but I wanted to put them separately. With a password, once you know it, you know it. It's again, it's part of something that you just remember, so this can also work as a separate form of progress. If you figure out what the combination to a safe is, I no longer need to make that progress every single time. I start with that progress. So it's a way of moving through the game. This one, we have the clubhouse password in Majora's Mask, and I've also got a safe which is locked in the game, and you can figure out the safe combination by reading someone's mind. So just to sort of put that into perspective, we've got gating methods here, which kind of, puts into perspective the previous slide. So we have the passwords, like I said, this is our locks, our combinations, can also just be physically passwords. This is learned information that must be remembered and can technically be used to cheat on a fresh save. I did want to mention, not necessarily cheating, but the difference between passwords and interaction gating. So for my interaction gating example, in Ann Achronist, you have to figure out, first of all, who your ancestor is. But you need to do a little bit of talking around the town before you figure out exactly who that is. You're not able to engage your ancestor in further conversation about what you would like to do, and you want to change their life, and you're some crazy witch lady from the future. You've got to figure out which perspective or which path you want to take with her, but those interactions are not going to be available to you until you've performed particular actions. So the game is physically stopping you from doing these interactions. On the contrary, if I load up a fresh load, I can just put in any passwords that I already know. It doesn't matter, it's a fresh save, but I can still bypass those. However, with interaction gating, this isn't something that's possible. Also, we have region gating here. So not only, well, this is basically more about physical space. Minute changes your spawn point, which allows you to access locations further away from your original spawn. So a lot of these games have the same spawn point, and you can sort of get either 22 minutes away, or you can get a minute away from your spawn point. Eventually, in minute in particular, you'll be able to move your spawn point, which allows you to sort of progress across the map. Obviously, there's only so far you can get in 60 seconds, no matter what other unlocks you get. And another common thing with this is items or abilities that allow you to use shortcuts to get to otherwise inaccessible areas. So sometimes there are areas that are physically impossible to enter. Say we have a key. You can't get into this house unless you've got a key. On the other hand, there are areas where you can go all the way around the town and you can get to where you need to be, but you've now got 20 seconds to do what you need to do. So that's another way that we can use region gating, and in this case we often have shortcuts. So very quickly in minute you pick up the sword and then you realize, oh, I can just cut across this grass, cut through the grass and get to where I need to be, which gives me more time to hang around in the factory, etc., because we know we have the limitation of the time loop. So those are two ways that we can use region gating. So now I just want to quickly talk about maintaining interest. With games that repeat a lot, we definitely want to have some quick restarts. I originally didn't want to put dialogue skipping in the game because I thought my dialogue is brilliant. And then I very quickly realized that I was hammering the spacebar. I thought it was going to break. So you need to have dialogue skipping in there if you have a dialogue heavy game, because there's going to be sections of dialogue that get repeated a lot. I have a fast forward function in my game, and this is definitely something that I would recommend if you are going to make a time loop game. You want to have some way of being able to pass the time, because sometimes you've got to wait until midnight or 11 o'clock and you have to spend that entire day literally just waiting. So definitely put in a fast forward feature. Dialogue shortcuts. So not only is there dialogue skipping, but also, for example, whenever you want to pick up the ancestor that you have in Ann Achronist, you have to go through a couple of conversations, which is fine, and you can quickly skip through it. But rather than skipping through it, I literally put in a shortcut which said, get your ancestor to follow you. And you just click that rather than having to click through 6, 7 options just to pick him up, because this is something that happens every single time. So it's really about respecting the player's time and improving the UX on that. Again, quick restarts. You want to be able to quickly, instantly end that loop. Shorten the time loop. So this was quite interesting. There's another game which I haven't mentioned particularly yet, but there's a game called 12 Minutes, which is a murder mystery game, which is coming out this year. In that game, the developer talked about deciding how long to have the time loop. Originally, they had it as 60 minutes, a whole hour, and they found that by shortening the time, it allowed them more freedom. Not only did they originally had a whole city to explore, but what they did was they brought the experience right down to an apartment, and it's now obviously only 12 minutes long. And you might think that that's more restricting, but actually they found that it meant there was less hand-holding, because they didn't have to say, oh, you should go to that gas station that's on the other side of town. Everything was in a small locale. And also, the longer the loop, the more difficult it is to figure out what exactly is causing which actions. So rather than having this, is it because so for example, in Ann Achronist, there is somebody who doesn't turn up to a party. Are they not at the party because you stole their birthday present, or are they not at the party because you spoke to them and made them sad? If you've got to figure out which one of those actions it was, I might have to repeat the whole game, just do one action and see what the outcome was. So it can be very difficult to determine the cause and effect the longer the loop. So the shorter the loop, definitely the easier it is to identify that. The other benefit of this is that you are never really very far from where you need to be. Yes, there is a lot to do in that small space, but you're very close to where you need to be, which reduces the need for traveling these massive spaces. One really important thing about maintaining interest in these games is mystery. Obviously, if we do a storyline and we're done with it, then every time we see it, it's not really engaging, as we're just like, oh, it's all about the monotony of that event, and it's not interesting to you anymore. What we try to do is put in some events that are never really fully explained. So every time they see that person, they're thinking to themselves, what is that person doing? And yes, I did complete that, the quest that they wanted me to go on, but why do they need a rubber chicken? So if you have those questions and you sort of plan some mystery questions in advance, I find it helps to keep the players engaged and constantly guessing. So there are mysteries in all of these games that I mentioned. The very obvious one for 12 minutes is the murderer's identity. The game is a murder mystery, and you need to figure out who has committed this murder. So that's a very interesting intrigue. In the Outer Wilds, the main cause of mystery is why is the universe ending? Obviously, you need to figure that out in order to stop it. In Majora's Mask, there are a lot of questions about what exactly is going on. There are tons of fan theories about this. Does the land of Termina even exist? He falls down a tree, I believe, kind of like Alice in Wonderland, and then we're in Termina, which has its own world, and you're not in a tree anymore. So there are tons of fan theories about whether or not that land even exists. So having those sorts of mysteries definitely increases the longevity of your game, and it helps to keep the players sort of engaged, as it were. So this is one that I thought was quite interesting. I worked with a writer on Ann Achronist, and we've put in a couple of mysteries where even we're not 100% sure what the answers are. So I wouldn't necessarily say just throw in any old crazy event that's unexplained completely, but perhaps make some mystery that doesn't necessarily have one answer. It could potentially have two. So there is, in Ann Achronist, we have a man who is in the bottom of the library basement, and no one seems to know he's there. And there are a few explanations of who it could be. It could be the king who's trying to lay low. We don't see the king all game. It could be the librarian's secret lover that we find out about. It could be the person on the missing person poster. We don't really know who it is, and it's never really explained. One interesting thing after we'd released this game is we had a couple of comments on the Steam forums, and they said, oh my god, who's the guy in the basement? So, unfortunately, I wanted to make sure that we had some engagement. I wanted to make sure that the community didn't think we were just abandoning them. So I did decide to reply to that, but I ended up answering the mysteries, which kind of killed the joy of the mysteries. So I would recommend, if you're working with the community, don't necessarily spoil all of your mysteries. I will speed this up because I'm running out of time. So there are a couple of issues. Fetch quests. When you start a fetch quest, it's kind of annoying because you have to initiate the fetch quest before you have to start the interactions. So it might mean you have to move all the way to the other side of the map and then go back to where you started to pick something up. That was something that was a bit of a pain. Direction. It's very difficult to know exactly where to go because you're in a really small space. Which is where the game takes place, but at the same time you've got really late game content that could be seen very early on. It's great because it keeps the mystery going, like I said, but at the same time it can be really confusing for a player because they've got tons of quests and they're not really sure where to get started. The answer to this is including some quest logs, which I'll show on the next page. Apathy. When you repeat an action over and over, you become desensitized to it. So we found that people were less bothered about killing somebody the more they played the game, which was interesting. Protagonist's memories. Does the protagonist remember everything that they did? The player definitely does, but are those necessarily the same? And a dwindling sense of urgency. You can always repeat, so what is the point in doing anything, really? You can always repeat and restart. This is the event log in Majora's Mask. Event logs and quest logs really help to give the player direction and remember what they haven't done yet. In this case, this shows all of the schedules for the villagers. In this case, this was the quest log for Ann Achronist, so it tells them what they need to do, what they've forgotten to do. And finally, in Outer Wilds, they have a ship's log of rumors with either confirmed or denied rumors, and also it's basically the quest log, which tells them what they need to work on and discover next. Benefits, it's really good. There we go.